objectives. At the end of this session, we should be able to discuss the unique, the peculiar anatomic and physiologic features that will distinguish a child from an adult patient. Specifically with regards to the CNS, CVS, RESP, GI, GU, and GS. And then be able to explain how these anatomic and physiologic features will influence later on drug handling and response with regards to the four pharmacokinetic parameters: absorption, distribution, metabolism, and excretion. So later on, as we go along with the concepts in pediatric therapeutics, more so when you go into clinical medicine, you'll be able to understand why for this particular age group, we do some dosage adjustment, why for this particular age group, the recommended dose is this much, while for the other age group, the recommended dose is this much, and the recommended frequency is different because of this anatomic and physiologic features. And then later on, we'll go through some of the common pathologic states in children, and we'll look into how this pathologic state will influence drug handling. So specifically, we'll go through protein energy malnutrition, overweight and obesity, as well as impaired renal function. Okay? Okay, so it has always been a dictum in clinical medicine, more so in pediatrics, that a child is not a miniature adult. So hindi pwedeng whatever the dose of a certain medication for an adult, sige, hatiin nyo na lang, i-half nyo na lang, anyway, half the age naman yung patient. Say for example, some of you are 20, 22, 23, your patient is 11 years old, sige, ang recommended dose for a 20 years old is 500 milligrams. Since 10 years old lang yung patient, sige, hatiin na lang natin. 250 milligrams na lang for this 10-year-old, since half naman yung age na. We don't do that in clinical medicine. It's not because half yung age, half yung size ng patient, half yung weight, we have to adjust the dose as is yung batay half. We don't do that. There are certain considerations whenever we do adjustment of dosage in children, and we look into the anatomic property of that particular age group as well as the physiologic properties. And so therefore, again, this is a dictum in medicine: a child is not a miniature adult because of the very dynamic physiology as we go through the different stages of childhood and adolescence. And therefore, pediatric patients are recognized as a special population. And also, in the different age groups, age categories of pediatrics, may mga sub-specialized groups pa yung mga yan. See, for example, adolescents. So between 10 to 18, 10 to 19, meron pang 10 to 13, 13 to 15, 15 to 18 years old. So therefore, we have to look into some of these properties. Again, they are a special population for drug therapy because many anatomic, we cannot overemphasize this one. The many anatomic and physiologic changes that take place during childhood, which may have an impact in the pharmacokinetics as well as the pharmacodynamics. Yung mga drug receptors, yung mga responses ng mga drug receptors at the different age groups, they also have an impact on dosage calculation as well as dosage adjustment. And so for this purpose, we follow the international classification of the different pediatric age groups. So we have the preterm newborn, so these are neonates less than 37 weeks. Newborn is between 0 to 28 days. Infant, more than 28 days until 12 months or 1 year old. Toddlers, more than 12 months to 23 months, so basically 1 year old to 2 years old. And then preschool child, 2 to 5, school age, 6 to 11, adolescent, 12 to 18. So in some references, 18 and 364 days. Kasi pag nag-365 na yan, 19 years old, already considered as adult. Now, differences in anatomy and physiology in pediatric populations compared with adults can ultimately influence the concentration of drug within the plasma or tissue, as I've mentioned earlier. So therefore, as healthcare professionals, we need to be aware of these certain anatomic and physiological changes that may affect pharmacokinetic profiles of drugs to understand the consequences of those adjustments in infants, in children, as well as in adolescents, as well as in children with special needs, with certain medical conditions. Okay, so you already had this in your first year. Review lang ng anatomy and physiology. I know a lot of you favorite ng anatomy and physiology. Sino ba ang best in anatomy dito and physiology?
Vita jar.
Sino ang best in anatomy and physiology dito? Hindi ko kayo tatawagin. Sino?
Ison.
Sino?
Ison.
Anyway, you had this in your anatomy, but we'll just emphasize some of the important features. With regards to the CNS, you know that in smaller kids, in younger kids, the protective brain, blood-brain barrier is not yet well developed and is underdeveloped in premature infants as their body's connective tissue have not yet been strongly formed. So what will now be the implication of this one? Now, while the blood-brain barrier normally keeps potentially harmful drugs and other toxins from entering the brain, these same toxins and drugs can easily enter a child's brain because of the immaturity of that barrier, yung blood-brain barrier. Sa mga premature, sa mga smaller kids, not yet fully developed, and therefore, they are more susceptible to the toxic effects of some of these drugs and also some of the toxins. So therefore, extreme caution is required when administering drugs to these young patients. When the blood-brain barrier is weakened, certain drugs can potentially harm the neonatal infant's brain. So they can easily pass through that barrier, therefore rendering the brain, the developing brain susceptible to the harmful effects of all of these drugs and toxins. Now, drugs with known side effects that include neurological impairment therefore require careful administration. So these side effects are more common in the pediatric patient, particularly among neonates. Sino yung mga nurses dito? Wala na yung mga nurses natin, pharmacists. Naglaho ngayon, nurses naman. Sino yung mga nurses dito?
Jessica po,
Or yung mga nag-NICU?
RN 2022.
Sino yung mga nurses na nag-NICU?
Cold. Marimla po.
Pinlock po.
2023 po.
Sino ba talaga?
Kakapasa lang po nun.
Top notcher po.
Sino?
Ito po, top notch.
Sino yung
Sige, NICU nurse. So among your septic patients, among neonates admitted for sepsis, ano yung usual antibiotic na binibigay sa kanila? Yung mga NICU nurses or yung mga ward nurse, yung mga nag-ward na dito at some point, you were able to handle yung mga neonates that were looking with
Dok, ano daw po
antibiotics.
tanong? Ano daw po ulit tanong ba?
Ano yung mga usual antibiotic na binibigay for kids, for neonates with sepsis or potential sepsis? Gentamicin, ampicillin and gentamicin. Were you able to take note of the frequency and dosage of gentamicin as well as ampicillin? So for neonates, for children, for patients less than 28 days, the usual dosage of ampicillin is 100 mg per kilogram per day in 2 divided doses. So you have to give 50 mg per kilogram every 12 hours. But for older kids, the dosage recommendation is 100 mg per kilogram per day to 200 mg per kilogram per day in 4 divided doses. So you can give it every 6 hours. So looking at that, example, nakikita nyo na in infants, in neonates, we do certain adjustment. And there's a rationale for that. There's a wisdom behind that dosage adjustment. Also very common sa mga neonates, not responding to the usual antigen, we also give cefotaxime. It's a third generation cephalosporin. But later on, if you will go through that very detail, why is it that neonates are given third generation cephalosporin? And among the third generation cephalosporin, only cefotaxime is given. Why is it that ceftriaxone, a third generation cephalosporin, is not given to the neonates? May rationale din siya. Although they belong to the same class, they are both third generation cephalosporin. In terms of coverage, in terms of antimicrobial coverage, basically pareho lang. But why is it that ceftriaxone is not given, is contraindicated sa mga neonates, and cefotaxime is a better choice? So, again, there's a rationale for that because of yung mga protein bindings, and then later on, rendering yung increased susceptibility for neurotoxicity because of the cephtriaxone. Anyway, this is pediatrics naman, not pharmacology. Okay, so for the cardiovascular system, again, just a review, no? At birth, the right ventricle has been working against systemic pressure, and the muscular bulk is therefore only 25% smaller than the left. When fetal circulation changes and pulmonary circulation is established, the left ventricle rapidly grows and its muscular bulk becomes about twice of the right at age 2 years. Some of the important features of the cardiovascular system are the following. So we have the foramen ovale, again, review. It lies at the level of the third intercostal space between the right atrium and the left atrium. It is approximately 5 millimeters vertically by 4 millimeters wide in size and allows blood to bypass the pulmonary circulation in the fetus. And once respiration at birth, once respiration starts and the pulmonary circulation is established, it functionally closes. And this is brought about by higher pressure in the left atrium resulting from increased pulmonary venous flow from the lungs causes the septum primum of the interatrial septum to close the opening. And over time, the tissue will seal the foramen and becomes the fossa ovalis. Mga kinalimutan nyo na nasa anatomy, no? We also have the ductus arteriosus. This is roughly 8 to 12 millimeters long. It bypasses the pulmonary tract to the arc of the aorta in the fetus. The wall of the ductus arteriosus is populated by smooth muscle, connective tissue, and elastic fibers which proliferate close to birth. Now, during the first few minutes after birth, bradykinin is released by the lungs on adequate exposure to oxygen and from the umbilical cord when the temperature drops after birth. So this will now cause constriction of the ductus arteriosus and the umbilical vein and artery. Now, with regards to the umbilical arteries, these are direct continuation of the internal iliac arteries. At birth, the smooth muscle in the wall constricts and the arteries are obliterated, and the remnants of these arteries become the medial umbilical ligaments seen on the undersurface of the anterior abdominal wall covered by the medial umbilical folds. Umbilical vein, this passes from the umbilicus within the falciform ligament superiorly and to the right for 2 to 3 cms to the porta hepatis. It contracts after birth and its remnant is the ligamentum penis. I know this is a very unholy hour for discussing mga anatomic variations, but we have to go through. Anyway, ductus arteriosus, before birth, the ductus venosus shuns most of the umbilical venous blood into the inferior vena cava, allowing the oxygenated blood to bypass the liver. So basically, this is a bypass. No? It closes during the first week of life in term neonates, but may take longer to close in preterm. The remnant is the ligamentum venosus. Okay? So much for those anatomic landmarks. So we have here a table which actually shows the different age groups, different pediatric age groups, and the normal ranges in terms of heart rate, systolic blood pressure, respiratory rate, blood volume. Again, take note, for different age group, we have different set of normal values. So these are some of the physiologic variations. So what may be normal for, say for example, for an adolescent, a 12-year-old patient may no longer be normal for a neonate. Say for example, ang heart rate ng patient, you have a 12-year-old male patient at the ER with a heart rate of 75. So this is still normal for that patient, for a 12-year-old. But if you have that same rate, same heart rate, 75, for a neonate, that's already bradycardia. So matataranta ng residente na bumababa na ang heart rate ng bata because it is no longer normal. So these are some of the important properties, no, of the different age groups. Same with systolic blood pressure. Yung normal systolic blood pressure for a neonate is between 60 to 90. So basically, kung 65 yan, 75, na systolic, still normal for a neonate. But if you have that systolic blood pressure for a 12-year-old, a 13, 14, 17, or even 18-year-old, ang systolic mo 60, hypotensive na yung patient mo, natataranta na rin yung residente sa ED. Also with respiratory rate. The normal RR of a neonate is, this is based on AAP 30 to 60. Sa Nelson, it's between 40 to 60. For an adolescent, ang normal is 12 to 15, or 12 to 20 in some references. So, if you have, say for example, you have a 13-year-old patient, yung respiratory rate niya is 30, this is already respiratory distress. But for a neonate, this is still normal. Okay? So these are some of the important concepts that you have to be familiar. Now, particularly later on when you go into clerkship, internship, or even in clinical practice. What may be normal for a certain age group may no longer be normal for another age group. So these are, again, the important anatomic considerations and physiological considerations that you should be familiar with. So you don't have to memorize naman, unless of course you'll go into pediatrics later on. But at least alam nyo, you know that there are certain normal ranges for this particular age. Huwag nyo kakalimutan yan, ha? Kasi sometimes I also receive referral. Not normal po yung heart rate ng patient, normal yung BP ng patient. Pagka-flat ko, hypotensive na yung patient. Wala pang ginagawa sa ER. I had several cases na gano'n. Doc, normal po yung BP, stable ang BP. What is the systolic blood pressure of the patient? This is the P50 of the systolic BP. 60. I had an actual patient in one of the hospitals dito, a 6-year-old. Refer sa akin nasa 60 systolic, actually 60, 60-40. And then, walang IV line, walang bolus. Tinakbuhan ko yung patient sa ER pagdating ko, hypotensive nga, upon double check, hypotensive, so we have to give boluses of fluid. Well, for a neonate, that could still be normal, but for a 6-year-old, hindi na. Okay? So another table, so these are just some of our references, no? from American Academy and American Heart Association. Okay, so with regards to the respiratory system, the tongue is relatively large and the nares small. The larynx is anterior. It's actually more anterior encephalad at the level of C3 to C4 versus C6 in an adult patient. The trachea and the neck are short. Therefore, children up to age 5 years may be obligate nasal breathers. Trachea is short and the cricoid cartilage is the narrowest point of the airway in children under 5 years of age. The alveoli, they continue to increase in number and size until around 8 years old. At term, airway patency is maintained by surface active proteins which are deficient in premature babies. The neonatal thorax has a rounder circumference when compared to the adult thorax, which is actually more flattened. It is very compliant and therefore susceptible to collapse during negative intrathoracic pressure, and the work of breathing is much greater in children. Now, the type 1 muscle fibers, which are fatigue resistant, seen in adult intercostals and diaphragms, are not prominent until about age 2 years. Now, for the oral cavity, the large tongue is short and broad, lying entirely within the oral cavity, begins to descend into the neck during the first year of life. The posterior third forming part of the anterior wall of the pharynx by age 4 years. And during suckling, the high position of the larynx is elevated further so that fluid passes directly into the pharynx. So therefore, this enables the infant to feed and breathe at the same time. So greater risk for aspiration, actually. Now for the esophagus, at birth, the esophagus is approximately 8 to 10 centimeters long and extends from the cricoid cartilage to the gastric cardia at the level of C4 to C9 and possesses the same constrictions as that of the adult. Ano ba yung mga constrictions ng esophagus? Sabihin na natin at the level of 3 constrictions, diba? So yung mga best in anatomy. So what are the constrictions? Nakalimutan na. Saan? Yung legs. Saan? Nakalimutan na. Anyone? Constrictions of the esophagus. You have to remember that kasi very, very prone yung mga pediatric patients for obstruction. So, say for example, nasa ER kayo, lumukot ng piso yung patient, you have to look into nasa level ba, nasa level na yan, baka kasi mag-obstruction yung constriction. Okay? So, the adult esophagus starts and finishes 2 vertebral bodies lower. So, this is between yung adult C6 to T11. Now, with regards to the abdomen, in babies, the abdomen is broader than it is long, and open procedures are generally made through the transverse supraumbilical incisions. In the adult, the abdomen is generally rectangular with the long axis vertical. Now, with regards to the stomach, this is very small at birth and lies under the liver. It descends 5-fold in the first few days once swallowing and feeds commence. Acid secretion begins during the first day of life. Anterior surface is nearly entirely covered by the left lobe of the liver, only a small portion of the greater curvature being visible below. Now, the size of the stomach increases rapidly from 30 ml in a term baby to 100 ml by the 4th day. So basically, until the first month of life, approximately that's 100 ml. So an adult's stomach has a capacity of approximately 1 liter. So during the first few hours of life, technically what we usually tell the parents or even yung mga nurses handling mga neonates, the gastric capacity is roughly between 5 to 10 ml, parang the average size of a calamansi. But as days go by, nag-increase yung capacity niya until around 100 ml during the first month of life. With regards to the small and large intestines, the small intestine has fewer and less marked circular folds that are seen in adults. The mesentery contains very little fat, and with regards to the dimensions, small intestine is between 300 and 350 centimeters long in term baby. It lies in a more transverse orientation than in the adult due to the abdominal bladder. Now for the large intestines, approximately 60 centimeters long and has a very poorly developed muscularis. The ascending and descending colon are relatively short and the transverse colon relatively longer. The normal rostra, the appendices epiplocate are not prominent or not present, giving it a very smooth outline. Take note that rostrations, which are the characteristic feature of the large intestine, they appear over the first 6 months of life. As to the liver, relatively large in the neonate, being 4% of body weight compared to the adult where it constitutes only 2.5 to 3% of the total body weight. The right lobe extends below the costal margin anteriorly and lies close to the iliac crest posteriorly. The left lobe can extend to the lateral wall of the abdomen, overlying the stomach and the spleen. As to the gallbladder, it does not extend to the edge of the liver and has a small peritoneal surface. The majority are embedded within the liver, and after age 2, it has proportionately similar characteristics to an adult. Now for the peritoneal cavity, the anterior abdominal wall, it bulges forward in the neonate to accommodate the bladder, the uterus, and ovaries, which are actually pelvic in the adult. So that's why later on, once you go into physical diagnosis, whenever you do your physical examination, makikita nyo yung abdomen ng neonate, it's actually more globular than flat. Now this is accentuated by the flattened diaphragm pushing down on the supracolic compartment. So this is also a common feature until age 2, no? So age 2, napapansin niya, sino dito may mga kapatid na around 1 to 2 years old, or baka meron na kayong anak, 1 to 2 years old, ano yung mga common, when they stand, ano yung mga common observation niyo sa kanila when they stand? Sino na yung mga anak dito?
Lalena. Lalena.
Sino na yung sige, may kapatid na lang na 2 years old or 1 year old. When they stand, ano yung usual na napapansin niyo sa kanila? 1 year old or 2 years old, ano yung usual na napapansin niyo sa kanila when they stand?
Shaky po. Shaky yung pagtanong.
Aside from that, with regards to the abdomen, when you look at them from the side, protuberant yung abdomen nila, and they have what we call the physiologic lordosis. Ganun yung sa nila. Because of the physiologic lordosis. And physiologic lordosis usually resolves after 2 years old. And this actually has a very significant may implication to whenever we do physical examination. I'm not sure if this was emphasized during physical diagnosis, but when you do the anthropometric measurements for children less than 2 years old, what do you measure? Is it the height or the length? For children less than 2 years old, what do you measure? Is it the standing height or the recumbent length? Recumbent length. If if the child is able to stand, so less than 2 years old, say for example, 1 year and 6 months, the child is able to stand, will you still check the recumbent leg or the standing height? If the child is operative,
Standing.
standing height or the recumbent?
Standing.
So if you measure their standing height, do you do some adjustment? Or
Yes. Minus.
You do
Minus po.
minus,
7.
point,
Hindi ko lang.
you do some adjustment. So if the child, for children less than 2 years old, and the patient is cooperative, you can measure the standing height, but you do adjustment.
9.
If the patient is not cooperative, then you measure the recumbent length. Again, do some adjustment with sa calculation. Why? To account for the physiologic lordosis. Kasi kapag measure mo yung recumbent length, ay yung standing height, you have to add ka ng 0.7 if you measure the standing height. Because of the physiologic lordosis, so basically pag pinatayo niyo yung bata, medyo bababa yung height niya kasi nga nakaprotrude yung chan niya. Ang tendency, yung central axis niya mag-lean forward because of the lordosis. But once you allow the child to lie flat, mako-correct yung lumbar lordosis. So you will actually be able to get the actual length of the child. But you have to use yung proper stagiometry. Okay? So remember that board question yan, even sa mga specialty boards na why is it that for children less than 2 years old, the ideal measurement of the anthropometric is the recumbent length? Because of the physiologic lordosis that usually corrects after 2 years old. Now, with regards to the kidneys, they are lobulated at birth. They have wide caliber ureters and lie under relatively large adrenal glands. Now, for the bladder, the apex of the unfilled bladder, it lies midway between the pubis and the umbilicus, and when filled, they reach the level of the umbilicus. Medyo mataas talaga yung position ng bladder for smaller kids. Only the posterior surface is covered with peritoneum, and although considered intra-abdominal, about half lies within the pelvic cavity. It does not truly become pelvic until about the 6th year of life. So again, this contributes to the globular anatomy. Now for females, the ovaries are much larger than the testes at birth and weigh approximately 0.3 gram. They lie in the iliac fossa at birth and descend into the pelvic position in early childhood. All the primary oocytes are already present at birth after the first trimester. The uterus is influenced by maternal hormones during fetal development and usually decreases by about a third in size after birth until puberty is reached. At birth, it is approximately 2.5 to 5 centimeters long and 2 centimeters wide. The uterine cervix accounts for the 2/3 of the size of the uterus. Now for males, the testes, they are situated at the deep ring by the 6th month of gestation, and 98% in term babies and 80% in preterm babies will have descended testes at birth. So take note for term, 98% of term babies will already have descended testes at birth, and only 80% of preterm will have descended. The processus vaginalis is collapse at birth, but not necessarily obliterated. 80% are obliterated 10 to 20 days after birth. Now for the inguinal canal, this is similar to the adult. It is rarely true that the internal ring and external ring overlap. Now for the musculoskeletal system, before birth, the fetus is weightless within the amniotic sac and can assume any position and still develop normally. The normal skull is approximately circular in cross-section, whereas many premature skull, they develop elliptical cross-sections. Bones of all children have an important hematopoietic function, which in adults is limited to the red marrow of the ribs, the sternum, the vertebrae, and the proximal ends of the humerus and femur. Now for the vertebral column, at birth, the spinal column is very flexible and lacks the fixed curvatures present in adulthood. The thoracic curvature develops first, being concave anteriorly. The cervical develops at around 3 months when the child is able to support the weight of its head, and the lumbar when learning to walk at around 1 year. Now for the upper limbs, they are well developed and long compared to the lower limbs. The elbow is unable to fully extend at birth by about 15 degrees. Neonates have a relatively strong grasp reflex and able to support yung own weight within the first few days of life. As to the lower limbs, they are underdeveloped and remain in a flexed and abducted position in the neonate. They appear bowed due to the relative immaturity of the medial head of the gastrocnemius compared with the adult. So that's basically all for some of the anatomic and physiologic. Again, these are just some of the important features, no? Just a review of what you actually had in your first year. Let's now look into some of the pharmacokinetic considerations at the different age groups. So again, you had some of these concepts in your pharmacology. Now, the accurate determination of a safe and effective dose of a drug being prescribed to a neonate, to an infant, to a child or adolescent, is dependent on understanding the pharmacokinetics as well as the pharmacodynamics of the particular drug, as well as the clinical characteristics of the unique neonatal and pediatric patients. So again, you had this in your pharma during the first few months. The pharmacokinetic parameters, no? Absorption, distribution, metabolism, and elimination. So let's go through the first concept. Absorption. Now, several physiologic factors affect absorption. You had them in your pharma. One or more of which may be altered in the face of certain disease states, such as inflammatory bowel disease, diarrhea, and consequently they produce changes in drug bioavailability. The rate and extent of absorption can be significantly affected as a consequence of a child's normal growth and development. So let's look into some of the routes of absorption. For the per-oral absorption, or absorption through the GIT, this is influenced by the physiology of the stomach, of the intestine, as well as the biliary tract. I think na-discuss natin to sa pharma, di ba? Yung mga pH, etc. So one important feature affecting per-oral absorption is the acidity of the gastric environment. Now, the gastric pH, it changes significantly throughout development with the highest value occurring during the neonatal period. Now, in the fully mature neonate, the gastric pH ranges from 6 to 8, so basically neutral at birth, and drops to pH 2 to 3 within few hours after birth. However, after the first 24 hours of life, the gastric pH drifts upward because of the immaturity of the parietal cells. Again, at birth, yung gastric pH between 6 to 8. And then later on, after a few hours, 2 to 3, more on the acidic side, but eventually, it will drift upward because of, again, the immaturity of the parietal cells. Now, as the parietal cells mature, the gastric acid secretory capacity increases. So therefore, the pH, the gastric pH, decreases over the first few months of life to reach consistent adult levels by 3 to 7 years of age. So the normal gastric pH, or the usual, the adult level, is achieved at age 3 to 7 years. So as a result, the per-oral bioavailability of acid-labile drugs such as penicillin or ampicillin is increased. In contrast, the absorption of weak organic acids such as phenobarbital, phenytoin, relatively decrease, a condition which may necessitate the administration of larger doses in the very young to achieve therapeutic plasma levels. Now, another important parameter is gastric emptying time. Gastric emptying is prolonged throughout infancy and childhood, consequent to reduced motility, which may retard drug passage into the intestine where majority of the absorption takes place. Gastric emptying rates, they usually reach or exceed adult levels by 6 to 8 months of life. With regards to the intestinal transit time, in older infants and young children, more rapid rates of intestinal drug transit can reduce the bioavailability for some drugs such as phenytoin, as well as drug formulations by reducing their residency time at the absorption surface in the small intestine. So later on, we'll have an example of this one, no? Yung mga patients na very common for mga pediatric patients, those with gastroenteritis, those with diarrhea, so therefore increase yung intestinal transit time nila, so therefore decrease yung contact time between the absorbing surface, so therefore decrease your bioavailability. Now, with regards to bile function, neonates, particularly premature neonates, they have a reduced bile acid pool and biliary function, resulting in a decreased ability to solubilize as well as absorb lipophilic drugs. So again, this will have an implication, therefore decreasing yung bioavailability ng mga lipophilic drugs. So basically, this table summarizes the different physiologic properties, physiologic alterations at the different pediatric age groups. So basically for neonates, as we've mentioned kanina, no, yung gastric pH nila at birth between 6 to 8 decreases within the first few hours, but after the 24th hour of life, nag-increase ulit, more on the alkaline side. So gastric pH, basically more on the alkaline side. Gastric emptying time, very irregular. Intestinal motility, reduced. Intestinal surface area, reduced. So therefore, decrease yung area available for absorption. Microbial colonization, also reduced. And biliary function, immature. So as you can see, for the neonates, you can actually predict yung response ng neonate if the drug is administered through the oral route. Considering all of these parameters, therefore you actually can predict that absorption of the drug, bioavailability of the drug, administered through the oral route is significantly very much lower because of all of these parameters. But for infants, gastric pH approximately between 2 to 4, no more on the acidic side. They already have increased gastric emptying time, increased motility. The surface area available for absorption, almost near adult levels, microbial colonization, near adult level, biliary function, near adult level. Therefore, sa mga infants, can actually give medicine through the oral route. Now for children, gastric pH is already within the adult level, gastric emptying time slightly increase, intestinal motility slightly increase, surface area, microbial colonization, biliary function, already that of the adult pattern. So therefore, useful na din yung per oral route for children. However, for neonates, we do not actually give medication through the oral route because of some of these properties. Now, for extravascular drug absorption with a bioavailability of 100%, IV drug administration is assumed to be the most dependable and accurate route for drug delivery. Absorption of drugs from tissues and organs can also be affected by development. Now, with regards to the intramuscular absorption, intramuscular blood flow changes with age, which can result in variable and unpredictable absorption. Reduced muscular blood flow in the first few days of life, the relative inefficiency of muscular contractions, and an increased percentage of water per unit of muscle mass may delay the rate as well as the extent of drugs given intramuscularly to the neonate. So again, therefore, intramuscular administration is not recommended for neonates because of this properties. Muscular blood flow increases into infancy and consequently the bioavailability of drugs given by IM route is comparable to that seen in children and adolescents. So that's why yung mga pamangkin nyo, mga babies nyo, after 6 weeks, so after the neonatal period, as early as 6 weeks, we already start giving vaccines through the intramuscular route because of this important property. Nag-i-increase na yung blood flow dun sa yung mga muscular blood flow, therefore nagiging effective na din yung route through the intramuscular administration. Ano ba yung mga IM, intramuscular, mga vaccines na given intramuscular? Di ba intradermal? Tapos na kayo ng preventive pediatrics, di ba? Tapos na ng preventive pediatrics. Ayan, nag-SGD yata kayo once. May na-handle ako na SGD to preventive. Kasi mga aking mga nag-report ng preventive pediatrics. Sino? Siya. Baka yung mga intramuscular. Ano yung mga intramuscular preparation?
Hepa.
Wala nakalimutan ko.
Hepa. Hepa.
Hepa B. Ano ba? Polio. Ano ba? ECV. Now, other routes, mucosal permeability, rectal and buccal in the neonate is increased and thus may result in enhanced absorption by this route. Transdermal drug absorption in the neonate and very young infants increase as the result of a more dehydrated stratum corneal and also decrease yung the infant layer between the epidermis and the so therefore increase yung absorption through the transdermal route. Now looking into the influence of ontogeny on drug absorption, among neonates, oral absorption, as we've highlighted earlier, very much erratic. But as the neonate grows into infancy, nag-increase na yung efficiency ng oral route. For children, almost near adult na yung efficiency ng oral route of administration. Now, for the intramuscular absorption, very variable sa mga neonates because of those anatomic considerations that we've had earlier. Infants, increase na yung efficiency ng intramuscular route. Children, almost near adult level na. Percutaneous absorption, increase because of yung dehydrated yung stratum corneum, decrease yung fat layers. So therefore, rapid yung penetration ng drug through the transdermal route. Increase in infancy, near adult for children. Rectal absorption, very efficient for neonates. Therefore, rendering the neonate susceptible to overdose to the toxic effects of drug administered through the rectal because ang taas ng absorption rate. Now, infants, already also efficient yung rectal route of administration for children near adult. So basically, this summarizes yung mga important considerations with regards to absorption at the different age groups. Normal developmental differences in drug absorption from most all extravascular routes of administration can influence the dose plasma concentration relationship in a manner sufficient to alter the pharmacodynamics. Now, therefore, it should be recognized that the presence of disease states which influence a physiologic barrier for drug absorption and or the time that the drug spends at a given site of absorption can further influence drug bioavailability and effect. So later on, the latter part of this discussion will go through some of the disease states in children that will affect itong mga parameters. Next is drug distribution. So you have absorption, distribution, metabolism, elimination. We'll go through the second pharmacokinetic process. This is drug distribution. As you've learned in your pharma, this is influenced by a variety of drug-specific physicochemical factors such as molecular weight and size, apparent partition coefficient, and pKa, as well as the presence of drug transporters, blood tissue protein binding, blood and tissue pH, and perfusion. However, age-related changes to drug distribution are primarily related to developmental changes in body composition and the quantity of plasma proteins capable of drug binding. Age-dependent changes in the relative sizes of body water and fat compartments may also alter the apparent volume of distribution for a given. So basically, this table, this graph actually, shows the percentage of total body water across the different pediatric age groups. So take note, during birth, approximately 80 to 90% of the total body weight is composed of water. And if we will divide this one, approximately between 40 to 50% is composed of extracellular fluid and only around 30 to 40 is intracellular. At approximately age 1 year or 12 months, the percentage of total body water decreases to approximately 65 to 70% of the total body. And during adolescent period, it actually approximates that of the adult level with a shift in the percentages of the extracellular and intracellular fluid. So therefore, this will eventually have an impact on drug handling. Now, the impact of developmental changes in body water spaces are exemplified by drugs such as aminoglycoside antibiotics, compounds that distribute predominantly throughout the extracellular fluid space and have a higher volume of distribution in neonates and infants as compared to adults. We've also mentioned about protein binding. The albumin, total proteins, and total globulins are the most important circulating proteins responsible for drug binding in plasma. Remember that only free and bound drug can be distributed from the vascular space into other body fluids and ultimately to tissues where drug-receptor interaction occurs. As you've learned in pharma, drug protein binding depends on a number of age-related variables as mentioned in this. So other factors, drug transporters, such as paraglycoprotein, MDR1, and MDR2 can influence drug distribution. So these drug transporters can markedly influence the extent to which drugs cross membranes in the body and whether drugs can penetrate or are secreted from the target sites, such as inside cancer cells or microorganisms, or cross the blood-brain barrier. So this table actually shows factors influencing drug binding in pediatrics. For neonates, they have reduced plasma protein, they still have fetal albumin, reduced total proteins, reduced globulins, increased serum bilirubin, as well as fatty acids. But for infants, yung plasma protein, plasma albumin nila almost near adult level, already absent na yung yung fetal albumin to decrease total proteins and globulins. Bilirubin and free fatty acids already normal. While for children, the plasma albumin near adult level, as well as proteins, globulins, while for bilirubin and serum fatty acids, already have the adult pattern. Now for drug metabolism, metabolism reflects the biotransformation of an endogenous or exogenous molecule by one or more enzymes, moieties that are more hydrophilic and thus can be more easily eliminated by excretion, secretion, or exhalation. So ito na yung biotransformation ng mga compounds. So the primary organ responsible for drug metabolism, as you've learned in biochemistry and pharma, is the liver. Although the kidney, the small intestine, the lung, adrenals, as well as blood and skin can biotransform certain compounds. Now with regards to metabolism, you have two phases. Phase 1 is non-synthetic. Basically, you have redox reaction, hydrolysis, hydroxylation, while for phase 2, this is synthetic, more on conjugation reactions. Now, even though there are many enzymes that are capable of catalyzing the biotransformation of drugs and symbiotics, the quantitatively most important are represented by the cytochrome P450. Familiar kayo with CYP, no? You have this in your biochem, which is a super gene family with at least 16 primary enzymes. The specific CYP isoforms responsible for the majority of human drug metabolism are represented by CYP1A2, CYP2C9, 2C19, 2D6, 2E1, and 3A4. So we don't have to memorize all of them, but again, later on, if you go into subspecialty training, you'll go back dun sa mga CYPs because this will have an implication in drug handling. Say for example, you have a pediatric patient with polymorphism in 2C9. What will be the effect of the polymorphism in 2C9 if the patient is exposed to a drug that is primarily metabolized by CYP2C9? So we had several cases of this one. Nagtataka kayo, why is this patient, you have two patients, patient A, patient B, they take the same medication in the same amount, in the same frequency, in the same duration. Basically, they have the same drug regimen. Same drug, same concentration, same stop dose, same dosage, tama yung computation, same yung frequency, tama yung duration, and yet, patient A developed toxicity when in fact, hindi naman na-overdose yung medication. So this would actually be traced dun sa metabolizing enzyme that could have some polymorphism or other defects. So that could actually influence your drug handling. And also, yung age ng patient at which these isoforms are already expressed. So later on in toxicology, we have one discussion yung sa metabolism, sa toxicity ng paracetamol. Why is it that children less than 6 years old, medyo mataas yung toxic dose ng paracetamol compared to children above 6 years old? So that is basically because of the immaturity of the CYP. So from there, with that concept, you can actually predict which among these patients will have severe toxicity. At birth, the concentration of drug oxidizing enzymes in fetal liver appears similar to that in adult liver. However, the activity of these oxidizing enzyme systems is reduced, which results in slower clearance and prolonged elimination of many drugs that are substrates for them, such as phenytoin, caffeine, diazepam, and many others. Now, as to phase 1 metabolism, activity is reduced in neonates, increases progressively during the first 6 months of life, exceeds adult rates by the first few years for some drugs, slows during adolescence, and usually attains adult rates by late puberty. So again, yung phase 1, mga redox reaction, reduce during the neonatal period. During the first 6 months, gradually nag-increase, exceeds adult rates during the first few years of life, slows down during adolescence, and then regains yung adult level by late puberty. Now for phase 2 metabolism, enzyme activity is reduced in the newborn and increases into childhood, It varies considerably by substrate, maturation of enzymes responsible for bilirubin and acetaminophen conjugation is delayed. Enzymes responsible for morphine conjugation are fully matured even in preterm. Now, the activity of certain hydrolytic enzymes, including blood esterases, is also reduced during the neonatal period, and the reduced activity of these plasma esterases in the newborn may account for delayed metabolism, resulting in prolonged effect of local anesthetics in the neonate. So this table summarizes the impact of development on drug metabolism. As we've mentioned, during the neonatal period, reduce yung activity ng cytochrome P450. Now, there are certain isoforms. In general, reduce yung activity ng isoforms, but there are several classification. There are several isoforms of your cytochrome. An example of which is cytochrome 3A4, which usually, based on literature, it reaches adult level at age 6 years old. So that's why an example of that is paracetamol. Na yung paracetamol basically metabolized via cytochrome 3A4. Now for children less than 6, we actually have a higher toxic dose for them because yung primary isoform of primary CYP isoform that metabolizes paracetamol into a toxic compound is not yet mature until around 6 years old. So basically for 1 year old, 2 years old, less yung napoproduce na, less yung metabolism to a toxic metabolite. While for children above 6 years old, based on literature, they already have the mature level of the cytochrome P450 responsible for metabolizing paracetamol into a toxic metabolite. That's why for children above 6 years old, lower yung toxic dose of paracetamol because once they overdose, once they reach that level, we assume that most of this paracetamol will be metabolized into a toxic compound because the isoform of CYP responsible for metabolizing paracetamol at this age is already mature. Now, phase 2, enzyme activity still reduced during the first 28 days of life. Blood esterase activity also reduced, and the pre-systemic enzyme activity reduced. And so therefore, drugs that are metabolized through cytochrome P450 phase 2 enzyme reduce yung metabolism nila. And therefore, we have to be very careful with the dosage calculation, with the dosage regimen, the duration, as well as the interval because of the risk for prolonged effect as well as toxicity. Now for infants, yung cytochrome P450 nag-start na mag-develop, mag-mature. Increased level of the phase 2 enzyme activity, blood esterase activity normal by age 1, and the pre-systemic enzyme activity already increased. For children, slightly decrease yung cytochrome P450 phase 2 enzyme near adult level, blood esterase, adult tatter, and pre-systemic enzyme activity near adult level. Now for elimination, the kidney is the primary organ responsible for the excretion of drugs and their metabolites, and the development of renal function begins during early fetal development and is complete by early childhood. So we don't have to go through this one, na-discuss natin sa pharmacology. Renal clearance is limited in the newborn by both anatomical and functional immaturity of the nephron unit. In both term and preterm neonates, GFR averages 2 to 4 ml per minute per 1.73 square meter at birth. In term neonates, GFR increases rapidly over the first few months of life and approaches adult values by 10 to 12 months. Basically, during the first year of life, the GFR is already that of the adult level. Now, in young children between 2 and 5 years of age, GFR may exceed adult values, especially during periods of increased metabolic demand, such as during fever. So these are some of the processes involved in elimination of plasma protein binding, renal blood flow, glomerular filtration rate, and tubular secretion. And all of these factors are altered in the first 2 years of life. Now, renal plasma flow, basically at birth, very low at 12 ml per minute. And it reaches adult levels of 140 ml per minute by age 1 year. GFR is 2 to 4 ml per minute at birth, increases to 8 to 20 ml per minute by 2 to 3 days, and reaches adult levels of 120 by 3 to 5 months, as we mentioned earlier. Altered renal drug clearance in the newborn and infants result in different dosing recommendations commonly seen in pediatrics, as I've repeatedly mentioned earlier. So this table summarizes the impact of development on renal drug elimination. So basically for neonates, halos reduce lahat ng mga function, mga processes. Glomerular filtration, tubular secretion, tubular reabsorption, active drug excretion, passive drug excretion, but they have increased excretion of basic drugs. So again, for neonates, specialized population, special population of pediatric patients, we do a lot of dosage adjustment. Now for infants, basically normal to near normal na yung mga level, and also for children, they already have adult drug. So this graph actually summarizes everything that we've had discussed in terms of the developmental changes for the different pediatric age group as they affect the pharmacokinetic parameters of absorption, distribution, metabolism, and elimination. So we just have to go through this one, okay? Let's now proceed to the pathologic states. May lecture pa kayo ng 3 p.m., di ba?
Pharma.
Ayaw kong i-overtime. Baka magalit yung next lecture nyo sa akin. Baka magalit yung next lecture nyo sa akin. We have 10 minutes. Okay. So, with regards to the pathologic states, so I only selected some of the very common pathologic states in children just to highlight how these disease states affect drug handling and therefore will necessitate adjustment in the dose. First is protein energy malnutrition, generally a nutritional problem that results from varying proportions of protein and calorie deficiency in infants and young children of developing countries. So these are some of the risk factors that are associated with increased incidence of PEM, poverty, lack of access to quality food, cultural, religious food customs, poor maternal education, inadequate breastfeeding, as well as lack of quality health. So in terms of spectrum, we could have underweight children, marasmic patient, marasmic kwashiorkor is a combination, or a kwashiorkor. So what happens in protein energy malnutrition? Protein deficiency and lack of immune mediators is responsible for immunologic deficiency in the humoral and cellular subsystem, which predisposes a child to infection. Carbohydrate deficiency can lead to abnormal lipid metabolism, which may manifest as marked reduction in adipose tissue in a child. Lack of substrate, specifically tyrosine, and coenzymes required for the synthesis of pigments in the hair and skin result in changes in the hair color and hyperpigmentation of the skin in marasmic kwashiorkor as well as kwashiorkor. The total body water is increased in proportion to the degree of malnutrition. Children with marasmus, they have the highest TBW, but contrarily, there is significant reduction in adipose mass as well as lean body mass. Distribution into adipose tissue of lipid-soluble drugs is known to be reduced in protein energy malnutrition. So clinical implication of such reduction is that the concentration of lipid-soluble drug would increase at the target tissue, therefore prolonging their pharmacodynamic actions. Plasma protein and fractions of the glycoproteins responsible for binding drugs are also decreased in PEM. As a result, in theory, there may be a substantial increase in the plasma-free drug fraction of highly protein-bound drugs, and children with PEM may experience variations in their response to drug treatment or be at risk of increased toxicity. Now, however, in clinical practice, the decreased plasma protein has not been reported to significantly increase the plasma-free drug fractions in children with protein energy malnutrition. Another problem common in patients with PM is diarrhea as well as vomiting. These are common problems of PM. Therefore, oral drugs may not irritate, and if it is, the transit time through the bowel may be decreased. So what would be the clinical implication of this one? Patients with PEM, they usually have diarrhea and vomiting. So if you give drug through the oral route, what would be the expected effect of this one? Decrease yung absorption because of decrease yung contact time because of rapid increase motility increase yung transit time, decrease yung contact time between the surface for absorption. So therefore, the bioavailability will be expected to be very good. PEM is also associated with venous atrophy of the jejunal mucosa, and this may impair drug absorption such as carbamazepine, chloroquine, sulfadiazine, and chlorothiazide. So again, decrease yung area available for absorption. So we expect most of the drugs to have low oral bioavailability because of all of this pathophysiologic changes. The GFR and renal blood flow are diminished, particularly in the presence of dehydration. So the impact of malnutrition on GFR is most relevant for children receiving drugs primarily excreted by the kidneys, such as penicillin and aminomycin. Now, physiologic changes in children with PEM were associated with abnormal disposition of drugs, which may necessitate drug dosage modifications. Next is overweight and obesity. Basically, obese individuals, they possess higher body proportion of fat, and generally they have a larger volume of distribution for lipophilic drugs due to distribution of these drugs into the adipose tissue. The volume of distribution of hydrophilic drugs will be altered due to increased lean body mass, blood volume, and decreased total body water percentage. Obese patients, they have decreased hepatic clearance secondary to fatty infiltrates of the liver. Obesity, they also increase both phase 1 and phase 2 reactions. It has been noted that kidney size increases with elevation in total body weight, resulting in increased glomerular filtration rate, potentially requiring more frequent dosage of renally eliminated medications to obtain the target therapeutic concentration. And then lastly, we have children with impaired renal function. In children, the main causes of chronic kidney disease are congenital diseases as well as glomerular disorders. CKD is associated with multiple physiological changes and may therefore influence various pharmacokinetic parameters. A well-known consequence of CKD on pharmacokinetics is a reduction in renal clearance due to decrease in glomerular filtration rate. However, renal dysfunction may also lead to modifications in absorption, distribution, transport, as well as metabolism of drugs. Now, due to a decrease in GFR, patients will be exposed to prolonged drug effects or even toxicity if the metabolites are pharmacologically active, especially if a large percentage of the active metabolite is excreted unchanged by the kidney. Now, dosages of drugs cleared renally should be adjusted according to creatinine clearance or the GFR. Recommended methods for maintenance, dose adjustments, or dose reduction, lengthening the dose interval for both. So basically for mga patients natin, no, either a pediatric patient or an adult patient, those with impaired renal function, we actually do some dosage adjustments. So later on, pag may mga exposures na kayo in the ward or in the ICU, you will see that yung mga patients na may kidney disease, for a normal patient, say for example, yung ampicillin, as we've mentioned earlier, every 6 hours, there are cases wherein ampicillin will be given every 8 hours now, or every 12 hours, and then we have to reduce the dose because we know that the clinical entity, the clinical problem of the patient, such as yung chronic kidney disease, will affect drug elimination. And so therefore, if we maintain yung dosage regimen ng patient in the same schedule as a patient with normal renal function, pwedeng magkaroon ng bioaccumulation in drug, therefore magkakaroon ng increased susceptibility for toxicity. So therefore, we have to adjust based on how the kidneys are functioning in terms of glomerular filtration and creatinine clearance. So again, these are some of the considerations that we do whenever we prescribe a specific dosage schedule or regimen for our patients. So basically, in summary, we were able to discuss some of the unique anatomic and physiologic features that distinguish children from adults, specifically CNS, CVS, RESP, GI, GU, MS. We were able to explain how these anatomic and physiologic features influence drug handling and response in children with regards to ADME. And then lastly, we were able to explain how some pathologic states that affect drug handling require dosage adjustments, specifically protein energy malnutrition, overweight, obesity, as well as patients with impaired renal function. And always remember, the dictum in clinical pediatrics, a child is not an age of adult. So there are a lot of anatomic, physiologic considerations, as well as the physiology of a developing child is very much dynamic. So that's all. Thank you, and
Shishire.
Shenzhen Sorting Center.